thanks Andy, who was the one who invited me up here. So, Lori Olson, I lived in Calgary for many, many years, but about 5 years ago I moved down to Lethbridge because, hey, I work remotely most of the time, so why not? Now, I've been a Ruby and Rails developer since Rails 0.13. So a long time. And yes, I did all those upgrades. But more recently, I wanted to do mobile development. And I tried really hard to do mobile development using Objective-C, because that was what it was at the time. And I have to say, I hated it. I mean, I actually did a project in Objective-C, like before there were iPhones. I did an Objective-C project. And I didn't like it a lot then, and I liked it even less when I started trying to do mobile development. I just found the language to be syntactically ugly and hard to read. And since my day job was doing Ruby and Rails work, I thought it would sure be nice to be able to do my mobile development with Ruby. So when RubyMotion came out, I was like, yes! And I started working on my own app using RubyMotion. That's another whole story that I won't go into, but it took me way too many years to get my app out because halfway through I ended up writing a book. So don't do that if you want to get your apps out. Now, RubyMotion and DragonRuby, those are two things, but really it's one thing. DragonRuby is the rebranding of RubyMotion. So right now, there is one thing called DragonRuby, and that's DragonRuby Game Toolkit. And it is used to create games. And that does not mean that we're only going to create games with DragonRuby. There will be a reimagining of RubyMotion, which is what we use to create mobile apps, iOS and Android. We can do tvOS, watchOS, and macOS, all with RubyMotion. So RubyMotion itself is going to split apart and be like DragonRuby Mobile Toolkit and DragonRuby Desktop Toolkit. So eventually we're going to have all of these. But right now, we have our classical RubyMotion stuff, and we have our brand new DragonRuby stuff. And they're still a little bit separate. The DragonRuby runtime is like a brand new, built from scratch thing. And the process of getting everything that works in RubyMotion now working on that new runtime is going to be a bit of an evolution. So that's where we're at. So RubyMotion. I do think that if you're going to do mobile development, you need to know the mobile development APIs. You're stuck with that, okay? So on Apple, that means you need to be able to read Objective-C or Swift examples because that's what the API is that Apple produces. And on Android, you need to be able to read primarily the Java examples, but there's some others like Kotlin if you're into that. So I strongly suggest that you get used to reading mobile APIs in other languages if you want to do mobile development using RubyMotion. Okay, that said, there are a lot of really cool gems that people have pulled together, created to make mobile development more fun. And the main one of which is a collection called Red Potion. This is, let's see if I can, there we go. Red Potion. Now this is a collection of gems, and primarily RMQ, which is, you know, I don't really like the analogy, but it's RubyMotion query, kind of like jQuery, but not. It's not jQuery, okay? It's not. But that was where its name came from. There's ProMotion, CDQ, that's core data query, so for your data stuff. AF Motion, that's for your networking kind of stuff. And then Motion Print and a bunch of other gems for more utility type functions. So all of that is cool. We've got all these gems pulled together, but what does that mean? Well, let's take a page from DHH's book and just try and do really quick a Red Potion app for you. Now first you have to make sure that you have the Red Potion gem installed. So gem install Red Potion, which I have already done, so I don't need to do that because I'm not foolish enough to actually trust Wi-Fi to get everything done. But to create an app now, like a whole app using Red Potion, we use the potion command, potion new, and I'm going to call this, swappy demo. And in fact, I think this works still. Skip AF Motion because, like I said, I'm not foolish enough to trust the network, so we aren't actually going to do network stuff. Now this creates, much like the Rails new command works, this creates an actual working app. So if you run Oh, bundle. You got to drop in, yeah. Oh, in the bundle? Did I? Did you drop down to the directory? Oh, drop down to the directory. Thank you. As you can tell, I've done that. You have, yeah. You know, and I have this in my notes, and I didn't do it. Okay, break. Now this basically is not like normal Ruby development. This is compiling code, and it's compiling a whole bunch of RubyMotion code, all those gems. It's also compiling some CocoaPods. And here we have our app running in the iOS simulator. Hey, did I mention you have to have Xcode installed because that's the only way to get the simulators. So you do have to install Xcode. And you do have to run it once because it wants you to run some stuff when Xcode starts the first time to initialize things. Question?
If you're running on Linux, do you have, are you completely out of luck?
No, it doesn't run on Linux yet. Like I say, it's
Yeah, okay, so RubyMotion only runs on Macs. DragonRuby, on the other hand. We'll get there, though.
Sure.
So this is really nice, having an app running, but we also have here a REPL. So you can actually do stuff with the REPL, but I'll just show you some stuff that is built into this default Hello World app that Red Potion produces. It's actually, you can print stuff into the console. So this is like so cool for debugging, guys. If you haven't done any mobile development, I'm telling you, looking through Apple's logs for stuff, for your NSLog stuff, when you're doing mobile development isn't really a lot of fun. So this is good. We have a REPL and we can do cool things. But for now, let's keep going. So when you exit out of this, it's like there's way too many people that just go, oh, Control C. And that actually is an interrupt of the REPL. To cleanly close the REPL, you use Control D. That's like close the file. If you didn't know that Control D was close the file, that's what it is. So use Control D. Now I am going to use my favorite editor, RubyMine. I know some of you probably don't like that. That's fine. I'm okay with that. But I like RubyMine.
RubyMine has some links where it'll populate, do some IntelliSense on some of the Apple things. So when you're doing RubyMotion and you're trying to get the APIs and stuff like that, RubyMine can be a little bit handier.
There we go.
There are some stuff for doing some of it in Sublime. Was there something for Atom, do you recall?
For Sublime, there probably was something to port it to Atom as well.
It's possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although they're based on, because Atom is, what's the build on? No, I'm drawing a complete blank. It's,
Electron.
thank you, it's Electron.
Electron, yeah.
And Sublime, obviously, isn't.
Okay, I'm just applying my gem set here so RubyMine knows what I'm using. Okay, so we'll just take a quick boo at what got generated for us. This actually looks a lot like some Rails stuff. I mean, we have a lib directory, we have an app directory, ooh, we have a spec directory. A lot of stuff should look familiar to Rails developers. But what I'd like to do now is show you more of my favorite stuff. So I'm going to go back to this terminal because I can more easily make the font big here. And go back to the top of the screen. So instead of having a Hello World app, I want to have my own app. I'm going to create my own screen for this. And we're going to use another Potion command. So Potion has generators, much like Rails. And we're going to create a table screen and call it main screen. So this is a generator that Potion uses. There's a lot of generators, and we can look them up. Where's the generator stuff? Oh, well, I'll show you that later. But there's a lot of generators to generate table screens, regular screens, models, all kinds of fun stuff. And we're just going to go over here and very quickly take our main screen. So I called this thing Swappy because my favorite demo stuff is using the Star Wars API. Because like, who wouldn't want to use a more interesting API? Star Wars API is fun. So we'll use that. And I'm not going to use a home screen. So we'll just get rid of that. Forget about save delete. Because I'll just go and change this. So app delegate is where we start. And this is like for mobile development, everything starts in your app delegate anyway. And we'll just go main screen here. Okay. So now that we have that, I'll go back and run rake again. So I've replaced the screen, I gave it a new title, and it's not going to recompile everything that was compiled already. It's just going to recompile the things that were changed or added. So it's much quicker. So now let's go back, and I added this as a table screen for a reason. I want to add some table data. Now the table data comes in here, and it's just like this empty array. Now table data is a little complex, so I brought it up here. Let's just make this larger. So the table data consists of an array of sections. Each section contains an array of cells. So we have the array of sections. So I'm going to have one section, so it's just a hash. Everything in RubyMotion really is just a hash most of the time. And we'll give it a title, and we'll call this datasets, because the Star Wars API has lots of datasets. And then there'll be the cells. Okay, so for cells, I already know this is constant. It's not really going to change. So I'm just going to type this in. And this is, let's see, films, people, planets, species, starships, and vehicles. Okay, we've got that. So what we can do here for the cells, and again, cells themselves are actually not just individual items. They have like titles, subtitles, and actions and things. So each one of these cells is actually something that looks like title. And I want to use the swappy datasets. So what I'm going to do here is say this is going to be my array, and it's going to be swappy datasets.map. And I'm just going to return a title that is the set. Okay, so this is to get data into my app. So let's see, that's what happens when you do Control-C instead of Control-D, I missed. And then we have our data sets. So this is like, you can get stuff on the screen pretty quick. So we don't really want to just have the stuff. We want it to do something when I tap on one of those. So to do that, I need to give each cell an action. And that's just going to be a symbol that will be the name of a method that gets called. Okay, so I'm just going to start making this look a little cleaner here. Hey. By the way, you know what's really irritating? I know you guys were talking about RuboCop. I kind of, once you get, RuboCop beaten into submission so that it does what you want, I actually kind of like RuboCop. And I really find it painful that I can't use RuboCop in RubyMotion because we're using a not quite Ruby 2 syntax. It was Ruby 1.9 syntax, and then they added in a form of named parameters that worked really well with Objective-C. It's really too bad that it was created in that time frame, because a couple of years later, and they would have just used name parameters, keyword. Okay, never mind. So we have this, and now I want to have a method here, and we'll call it select dataset. So you're going to go, okay, so, but how does it know what was selected? Well, there will be some arguments, args. And in fact, over here, I'm going to have to specify arguments that get passed, and I'm just going to pass the set. So that when you tap on one of those fields, it's going to call this method down here, and I'm just going to do args. Let's see what happens when we do that. Yoo-hoo. There we go. Okay, so you can see down in the REPL, when I tap on one of these, so I know that that's working. So a couple other things that would be nice, I would like those table fields, those cells to sort of have a visual indicator that they're tappable, because right now it just looks like a display of data. So what we want to do here is add an accessory type, and we'll use the disclosure indicator. Okay, so this is, again, this is still stuff that we get from Red Potion, specifically ProMotion is doing all this. This is a ProMotion table screen, as you can see up here. And it's giving us all this stuff for free. So let's look at that. And now we have this nice little disclosure indicator here. So cool. I would like to open up another screen, and I will, but before we do that, I wanted to show one little feature that blew my mind when I discovered it, is that there's this little class method called searchable, and it lets us search the table. And this is what you get pretty much for free, and we just give it a placeholder of whatever you want it, the search field to say when there's nothing typed into it. So search datasets. You can also, this is optional, but you can also give it a string to display when you have no results. So something like, sorry, try again. And
RubyMotion plug into like the I-18N gem for doing multiple languages?
There are 2 gems for doing internationalization, and I can direct you to those.
That's okay, just
There's 2 different ways of doing that. So anyway,
Localizations in iOS app or macOS apps are handled slightly differently. So they're similar, and there's some things that you can layer on top, but there's stuff in place for doing localizations as well.
yeah.
Just going through the I-18N translate.
No.
Yeah, but there's gems that give you the equivalent of that. So yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so you can see now we have a search field up here, and you can now start searching stuff, and it narrows it down. So we get this for free, like it's a one-liner, I honestly cannot tell you how much code it is to implement this by yourself. It's a lot. So this is one of the many reasons I love ProMotion and Red Potion. Okay, so let's go back and see what we can do here about maybe we should open another. So if we say case args here, when films, I'm going to open a films screen, which does not yet exist, but you know, work with me. So we're going to open a films screen when this happens, and otherwise, because I haven't got this yet, we'll have an else, and we'll just MP not implemented yet. Okay. Now, I've been using another terminal. You can run the simulator. Let me just close this down. You can run the simulator inside of RubyMine, which is really cool. I tend not to do that. I don't know. I still like using a terminal, but I like using this terminal. And I'll show you why. So I just sort of casually said, we'll open a screen, but I also said, oh, if I tap on something else, we'll just print not implemented. That's cool. And then I went, oh. And now if you were doing this in, say, Objective-C, this program would never have compiled because it wouldn't have found film screen. However, in RubyMotion, you can totally compile code that calls stuff that doesn't exist. So be careful about that. But anyway, when I get a trace back, I can literally tap on a link in my terminal and go right to the spot where there was the error. So that is why I use this terminal, is because it's super handy. Okay, so that just crashed out. So we try not to do that. Okay, next up, normally doing this example, I do an actual, let's look at the Star Wars API, which is super cool. It's swappy.co, and really it's all the data that you can think of about the films, people, planets, species, starships, and vehicles of Star Wars. All the films. So it's a lot of data. And really, if you want to have like just example data, at least make it interesting. So if Swappy doesn't, do it for you, find some open data. Use that. But no more like, let's not do dumb blog examples and to-do lists anymore, okay? Because they're boring. Okay, so instead, what I'm going to do, I actually copied down some of the result sets, which just come back as JSON. And I'm just going to copy those in to my resources directory. So star.json. And we'll go back over here. And under my resources directory, and I have a whole bunch of stuff. And we're going to look at the films so that we know what information is coming back from films. We have title, and that's a string, episode ID, and that's an integer, opening crawl, that's a string, director, producer, string, release date, that's a date. And then we have these arrays, and for lack of time, I'm going to ignore the arrays, so sorry. created at, edited at, and a URL that takes you to. Okay, so we have all this information. I want to create a model that this data can be stored in. And RubyMotion does this for us. And it does it in this nice, familiar way that us Rails developers know, schemas and migrations. So this is my very first schema. I haven't got anything in it. There's just a bunch of comments in it, so we'll just take that out. And I am going to create a new entity, and it's going to be called film. And it's going to have a string called title. And these are some fields that core data kind of is anal about, so we'll just let core data be anal and do that. And there's a lot of strings here, so I'm just going to copy that. We have opening, crawl, and director, and producer, and URL. And then we have an integer. We're using actual core data types here. Okay, so if you go and look at the core data documentation, you will see all the data types that you can use, and they're just named like this in core data query. So, and this will be the episode ID. And last but not least, we will have a date time for the release date. Okay. Did I say data time? You know, I really should have like an autocorrect on that. Because I type data time all the time. Okay. Now, it would be nice if a generator actually did that for us. And I will say, Andrew Havens has an add-on generator, which I don't have installed. So I just thought I'd show you doing it by hand. But Andrew Havens has a generator that will generate schemas, among other things, for you. It's just sort of an add-on.
Andrew Havens is the main maintainer of the RubyMotion gems. So the RubyMotion has a Slack channel called Motioneers, which of course is open to anybody. And Andrew is regularly on there and answers questions and support requests and things like that. As well as Amir Rajan, who is the primary maintainer, custodian, I think.
He calls himself the custodian, but now he has two partners now, so that's cool. So we're going to use another potion command here to generate our model file, which honestly doesn't need a lot of generation. It's not that large. But in order to use this in our table, it needs to have a couple more things. It needs a scope so that we can tell it how to sort this stuff. So we're going to sort by yes, release date. Okay, and this is one of the things that makes me twitch when I do this. There's a method you need to implement in your model that is basically view code. In my mind, it's view code, okay? And this is, we need to define the cell for that is going to be used to display this information in our table. So to do that, we need title, which is just going to be our attribute title. And I'm going to go crazy and put in a subtitle, and we'll just do directed by, and pull in the director attribute. Okay. So we created a model. Now, how do we actually go ahead and display this? Well, I need another, whoops. Generator here, Potion G, table screen. And again, there should be a data table screen generator, but there isn't. So we're just going to generate a table screen, and then we're going to turn it into a data table screen. And it's like really hard. Get rid of that. I'll give it a title, and we tell it what model we are looking at, which is, make sure I don't do this wrong. Right, model film, and this is where you need the scope. Released. Okay. So this is cool. We have another screen now, and we can come in here, and we can run this, and we can see what it does, which is going to be not a lot, but we'll see it. Ta-da! We have another screen. Okay. And we get all the navigation stuff for free. So again, that's cool. But it would be really nice if we actually saw a list of films there. So if we go back and look at our resources, I do have the actual film data in here. So what we want to do is read that in. And because this is dragging on, I'm going to copy and paste this code, because it takes too long. No, that's not where we're just going to put it. Film. That's where I was going to put it. Okay, this is just a quick and dirty use of another gem called Bubble Wrap. Bubble Wrap is a lovely gem that wraps a lot of the Objective-C API stuff and presents it in a more Ruby-like fashion. That's what it's for. So there's been a lot of other stuff added to it, like things like, hey, let's parse some JSON. Again, you don't want to know what the code looks like when you do this in the raw SDK. It's really ugly. But there is one tiny bit of raw SDK there, that NS bundle, main bundle, path for resource, and that's just the name and type of the file. So that's not too ugly. And then we just take that file and use NSData to haul it in. Shouldn't be too huge. If you're going to read in a huge file this way, you're going to run out of memory. But there are other ways of doing it. And then we just parse through the results. Did I open that file? Yes, I did. Okay, So it's just JSON, and it's the results, which is an array. So we want to go through each of the results and pull this stuff out. And with it, I'm going to create a film. And again, if you're a Rails person, this should look super familiar to you. You can just create objects and populate the attributes on the create command. And the only tricky thing here was the release date, which comes in as a string. And many moons ago, I found the cool date with natural language string parser that actually understands a huge variety of dates as strings and just gives them to you, gives them back to you. So I like that. And everything else is just pretty straightforward. The only thing, say here, this is sort of an idempotent command that we can run. So if we have any data already, it goes through and deletes it all, saves, calls the CDQ save, and then we load it all up and call CDQ save again. It will totally work if you don't call CDQ save. It totally will, but only for that session run of your app. If you don't call CDQ save and you go and compile and run your app again, all the data will disappear. So that CDQ save actually saves it on the simulator. So cool. Let us, oh, yeah, I installed or said that we should use bubble wrap and forgot to run bundle. Okay, Rick. Now it's going to compile bubble wrap, which is kind of large, but it doesn't take that long. Okay.
Bubble wrap has quite a bit of stuff, and you can actually segment it.
Yeah.
Just if I only want this section.
Yeah, you can go, jam, bubble wrap, require, and just a sub portion of bubble wrap if you don't want to use all of it. So there's still no films. That's because we haven't loaded them. Remember when I was talking about the REPL? Film.load. Boom. Oh, look at all those warnings. Okay, there's nothing I can do about them. I've tried so hard. Until we get our new and improved DragonRuby motion or mobile toolkit, I don't think anybody is going to put the effort in to implement annotations, because that's what we need, annotations. That's what core data uses, so that in your source file, you say, I have these properties in your model. That's what it requires. So at property and the name of a property, and just do that. We don't have those. So it sucks, but that's the way it is. However, let's go back to the simulator now. Ta-da! We have data. Okay, so I have like ridiculous amounts of more stuff I could do here, but I want to show you guys some DragonRuby stuff too. So I'm going to leave it here. I have an entire little workshop in my school that actually goes through this exact example in a lot more detail, not as fast. And we actually use data from the web using AFMotion to read it all in. And it also shows you how to get your app on your actual device and not just in the simulator. And you can do all that with the free version of RubyMotion. And if you are interested in that workshop, it's called RubyMotion Jumpstart, and I have a discount code for you, YEG19, half off. Okay, so done with this, so I'm going to be done with.
To put it on the device, you need to have a certificate, right? So that does require a paid
Nope.
No?
There is, Apple hides this like really, really well. You have to have a developer account on the Apple site. And if you were trying to do this yourself with a free account, it's like really super hard to find. However, we have gems.
Yeah, motion provisioning.
Motion provisioning is what you need, and it just creates everything for you. So that's fabulous. So that you don't have to hunt for what Apple is hiding on their site. You just have to tell it that you have a free account.
So a lot of the existing Apple developers that are just pure, they're using Swift or Objective-C, actually make use of something called Fastlane, which you may be interested to know is a set of utilities for automating a bunch of these tasks, and it's all written in Ruby. So the motion provisioning gem actually ties in with the Fastlane gems to give you access to all these sorts of things so that you can actually build scripts for your deploys and things like that, and actually setting up all your app store stuff, because there's a certain number of things, like so you need to have screenshots taken, you need to have them taken in all sizes and stuff like that. All handle it with things like Fastlane and stuff
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah, and yeah, Fastlane is primarily written in Ruby. They're starting to write some new pieces of it in Swift because you finally can.
Yes.
But yeah, it's entertaining how many iOS developers hate on Fastlane and CocoaPods because they're written in Ruby.
Well, it's the having to install something else.
Yeah.
Thing about it, right? So if they're doing all the stuff in Swift, it's why do I have to install Ruby, or why do I have to, right? You know.
So DragonRuby.org redirects you to this page on itch.io, because this is what we have right now is the DragonRuby game toolkit, and it costs $40 US to play, which is unfortunate. However, right now there is a game jam going on called Low Res Game Jam. So they only want you to use like really low res stuff. So Amir and Ryan put together a low res version of DragonRuby game toolkit for free to use for the game jam. So you guys, if you're interested, you should go and download it while it's free. And this pretty much says it. DragonRuby Game Toolkit is a 2D gaming environment. And it is sort of shockingly simple in that it only has 6 primitives, which is kind of crazy. You think, how can you write a game in 6 primitives? Well, you can. Let's see, can I go to my stuff? I think, where is the page that has all the cool stuff? That's my page. Oh well, so there's multiple games that you can play with DragonRuby. Why don't I have? I swear I had this. Up here. There's this. There is an online playable game here. I know I had it. I swear. Okay, let me just go back to my notes, and I'll show you some of how it works. Important thing, primitives. Okay, this is just some notes from my tutorial for DragonRuby Game Toolkit, which is free. Okay, you got to buy DragonRuby Game Toolkit, but my tutorial's free. And it's just a quick introduction. But basically, you have labels, sprites, lines, solids, borders, and sounds. And that's it. But you can build super surprisingly, I'm just going to have to look it up now. Nope, that's not the one. Third one? Oh, yeah, you mean the one that I've already been to? Yeah. There we go. Okay, so here's the fun part. DragonRuby runs not just on Mac OS, but on Linux, on Raspberry Pi, on Windows. So you can develop games using Ruby on any of those platforms, including Raspberry Pi. So this is cool if you maybe were thinking of teaching some kids how to play. You can do it really cheap with Raspberry Pi. Oh, by the way, if you're teaching kids, just reach out to Amir, and he will give you all the free licenses you want, because that's his thing. He really wants it to be easy to create games. And you don't just have games that you can play on all those platforms, which you can. You can play them on all those platforms. You can play them on pretty much any of the consoles. So you can, that's why you have to pay for this. You can publish a game that runs on Xbox, that runs on PS4, that runs on Nintendo Switch, that runs on
As long as you don't include,
yeah. Okay, so Flappy Dragon, and man, I suck. I suck so much. Yeah, okay, so Flappy Dragon. I did turn the sound off. I swear. Okay, I'm going to have to close the tab and reopen it again.
There you go. So what does that $40 get you? Does that give you access to a gem repository, or how?
Okay, this gives you access to the downloads for DragonRuby, which is the game engine. And that gives you the DragonRuby publish command that lets you publish your game, and it can be wrapped up, and like it's wrapped up and it's signed and everything, like if you're doing it for Mac OS.
publishes it to some of the gaming platforms.
Yes, and yeah, there's like an automatic for free, nothing else required
Game distributing platform.
to publish it to itch.
Is it tied to a machine, or is it tied to?
No,
They just give you a password so you can get in?
they just give you an account here so you can go and download.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. Okay, so it is this Flappy Dragon, 377 lines of code. This may look a little long, but honestly, it's mostly just breaking all those primitives apart into its major components, which you can see down at the bottom here, which is setting things up, so sort of a set your defaults, and then handle any inputs from the user. So you can access keyboards, you can access controllers, game controllers. You can access game controllers attached to your computer, which is kind of cool. I have a SteelSeries that I got for playing games on my Apple TV, but I can connect it up to my computer and play games with it. Handle inputs, handle rendering, do the calculations. So this tick thing at the bottom here, you get DragonRuby runs in 60 frames per second. That's the goal. So it hits that method 60 times per second. And sometimes if you're, on a crappy computer and doing a screen capture and running the game and a lot of other things, your frame rate drops. And you get warnings in the console about your frame rate dropping. But yeah, it is a really tight little kernel. Amir brought on Ryan Gordon, who basically is kind of the game engine guy for C-based stuff. And he's been writing some of these games. Like, I don't think he wrote Flappy Dragon, but there's a, okay, this is the page. This is the one I was looking at. Basic Gorillas is another one. So this reaches back, way back, if you're old enough, for QBasic. And there's a little game called Gorillas, gorillas.bass, that you could run. And again, this game has been recreated in DragonRuby, 380 lines of code with your defaults, your rendering inputs, that sort of thing. So let's just, see how this works. So I know I looked at this. Okay, type numbers on your keyboard and press enter to throw an explosive banana. So I don't know if you can see way up in the corner it says angle. So we'll go like 45 for angle and maybe 55. And not even close. And then you can, pass the keyboard off to your friend, and the other gorilla has stuff, and man, he's like way down here. So that angle is going to have to be sharp, like 85. And we'll go 75. Well, I tried. Okay, so I'm not going to play that anymore because I suck. But there are some really cool games that people are sharing all the time. And you can share these games with just like this one is, with a gist. And then people can take your game and go to fiddle.dragonruby.org, and they can paste in the code for the game and play it right here in the browser. So this is just a fiddle thing that they set up for the low res. Haha, I win. Honestly, it's way too easy to win this one. But there, so you can play it full screen too. And I don't know if you can hear, but my computer just started, the fan just started howling. So this is a bit of a pig running in the browser like this. But you can take this code and play it yourself. So there is a tutorial that you can go and download for free again. And if you have the DragonRuby stuff, let's go into the Mac directory and run DragonRuby here. And we've got planets that are all moving at sort of the right rate. And we have a spaceship. And we can run the spaceship right through the middle of all these planets. So anyway, this is a little, oh, is there not? Haha. There we go. This is a really basic sort of game, but if you go and look at it, so this is the structure of your project. So let's just bring up, so you don't have to use RubyMine. You can use like VS Code. And this is basically what the directory structure of your game looks like. You will have the DragonRuby executable. And once this is packaged, you can't see that, but this is just raw when you're developing. You have the DragonRuby executable, and you have a font file. So hey, you can customize the fonts by swapping in a different font file. And then you have an app directory with a main.rb. Now, if you want to have more files, you totally can break it out, but DragonRuby is watching this file for changes. And somebody just told Amir that it wasn't very friendly, that it didn't watch for other file changes. And he went, oh, you're right. So I think the next version of DragonRuby Game Toolkit, which comes out, they're releasing a lot of versions of it right now because of the game jam. We'll probably have an improvement here so that you don't have to keep all of your code in one file. But this right here is the extent of that entire little planet game, which isn't much. And it has some sounds, or a sound, which is the background sound. And it has some sprites. So images for displaying on the screen. And all the images for DragonRuby should be PNGs. That's just, they're trying to simplify things like really as much as possible. So instead of supporting every kind of image there is, it's just like use PNGs. And for sounds, if you want to use, you can use WAV or OGG files. So whichever of those. I think that was a nod to some of the open source people. And that's about all I had to show you for DragonRuby.